So, hello people, we're here again for another topic. So, for this discussion, ang ating topic is all about hedging. So, wag na tayo magpaligoy-ligoy pa, let us proceed to the discussion. So, ngayon, let's define hedging. So, what is hedging? So, para ma-define natin siya ng maayos, so, gumamit muna tayo ng isang illustration. So, kunwari, ang planet Earth ay in danger. So, paano siya in danger? So, meron kasing paparating na isang malaking asteroid. At itong asteroid na to ay babagsak sa planet Earth. Siyempre, alam niyo naman ang impact ng asteroid. So, magiging malaki ang damage kapag yan ay bumagsak sa planet Earth. So, dahil nanganganib ang planet Earth dahil sa paparating na asteroid, so, ang tanging magagawa lang natin para maiwasan ang pagbagsak ng asteroid o kaya naman kung babagsak siya is magiging mahina yung magiging impact niya pag siya ay bumagsak sa planet Earth. Siyempre, so kailangan natin ng pipigil dyan. At ang pwedeng pumigil dyan ay ang ating mga superhero. So, alam kong corny pero pagtsagaan nyo na. So, kailangan natin ng superhero para yung asteroid ay either masira o kaya humina yung kanyang impact sa planet Earth kapag siya ay bumagsak. So, paano natin ito mai-apply sa hedging? So, isipin natin na yung planet Earth is the reporting entity. So, ang ating reporting entity, syempre yun yung company, yung business. So, yung business, syempre alam naman natin na expose siya sa risk. Napakaraming risk na expose ang isang company. At pwede nating i-identify yung asteroid na pabagsak sa planet Earth as the risk. So, hindi maiiwasan minsan ang risk. Merong tatama at tatama na risk sa reporting entity. So, it's either pwede natin siyang maiwasan o kaya naman kung hindi siya maiiwasan, bawasan lang natin yung impact. So, i-minimize yung impact ng risk towards the reporting entity, the company. So, paano natin gagawin yun? So, doon papasok ang hedging. So, first, let us define hedging. So, sabi, hedging daw is an entity's risk management activity by making an investment or acquiring some derivative or non-derivative instruments in order to offset potential losses or gains that may be incurred on some items as a result of a particular risk. So, ang sabi dito, ang hedging daw ay ginagawa ng isang entity, normally syempre para either mawala yung risk o kaya naman mabawasan yung impact ng risk sa entity. So, paano ginagawa ang hedging for this particular purpose? So, pwedeng yung company daw ay mag-invest or mag-acquire ng either derivative or non-derivative instruments. So, para saan ang derivative or non-derivative instruments? Para mag-offset ng potential losses or gains. At saan manggagaling ang potential losses or gains? Dito daw sa mga items kasi sila ay exposed sa mga risk. So, ibig sabihin, sa isang hedging activity, merong dalawang character. Merong isang ino-offset at merong isang ipinang-o-offset. So, kumbaga, kung i-apply natin siya dito, etong risk na to, na dala-dala nitong asteroid, yun yung gusto nating mawala, di ba? Or mabawasan yung impact. So, ito yung kailangan nating i-offset. At ano yung gagamitin natin pang offset para mabawasan itong risk na to? So, syempre itong ating superhero. Siya yung gagamitin nating pang offset para mabawasan yung impact na dala-dala ng risk nitong asteroid na to. So, anong tawag natin dito sa may dala-dala ng risk? So, yan ang hedge item. So, ano naman tawag dito sa pang-offset natin? So, yan ay ang hedging instrument. So, sabi rito sa ating definition, yung ipang-offset daw natin is either a derivative or non-derivative instrument. So, ito yon yung hedging instrument. Again, ang hedging instrument can be a derivative or a non-derivative instrument. So ngayon, dito tayo sa definition nung dalawa, yung i-offset at yung ipang o-offset. So unahin natin ang hedge item. So sa hedge item, this is an asset, a liability, a firm commitment, a highly probable forecast transaction, or a net investment in a foreign operation that exposes the entity to risk of changes in fair value or future cash flows and is designated as being hedged. So again, itong ating hedge item, ito yung gusto nating i-offset. At bakit gusto natin siyang i-offset? Kasi may daladalang risk ito. Ito yung may daladalang risk sa entity. At saan nanggagaling yung risk na yon? Sa changes. Changes ng fair value or future cash flows. So ano-ano yung mga risk na dala-dala ng hedge item na normally gusto nating i-hedge? So, ang mga usual risk includes price risk, interest rate risk, and foreign currency risk. So, obviously, alam naman natin na itong tatlong to, yung price, interest rate, tsaka foreign currency, nagfa-fluctuate yan. Lalong-lalo na yung foreign currency. Lagi nyo itong nababalitaan sa TV. Araw-araw nagbabago ang palitan ng peso at ng mga foreign currency. So, ibig sabihin, nagkakaroon ng changes, kaya expose ang ating entity sa risk na yung change nitong tatlo na to ay maging unfavorable sa ating entity. Siyempre, yun naman ang iniiwasan natin, na yung changes nitong mga to ay maging unfavorable towards the entity. So, dito naman tayo sa hedging instrument. So, for the hedging instrument, sabi niya, this is a designated derivative or a non-derivative financial asset or non-derivative financial liability whose fair value or cash flows are expected to offset changes in the fair value or cash flows of a designated hedge item. So kung titingnan nyo, both hedge item and the hedging instrument, sila ay subject to changes in fair value or future cash flows. So kailangan both the hedge item and the hedging instrument ay subject to changes. Bakit? Kasi yung changes na dala-dala nitong hedging instrument, yun yung gagamitin natin again na pang-offset doon sa changes na dala-dala nitong hedge item. Again, para meron tayong mapang-offset sa changes na dala-dala ng hedge item, dapat ang hedging instrument is also subject to changes in fair value or future cash flows. So, ano daw ang mga basic requirements for hedging instrument? Dapat daw, isa siyang derivative that is measured at FVPL, except for some written options. Then, kung non-derivative financial asset or liability, dapat din daw measured siya at FVPL. Pero daw, for a hedge of foreign currency risk, the foreign currency risk component of a non-derivative financial asset or liability. Kasi, sabi, normally, a non-derivative instrument can only be used as the hedging instrument kung ang risk na gusto nating i-hedge is foreign currency risk. So, kaya normally talaga ang ginagamit na hedging instrument ay derivative instrument. Bihira tayong gumagamit ng non-derivative instrument. Pero pwede naman kung ang risk na gusto nating i-hedge is foreign currency risk. So, dito tayo sa hedge item. Ano-ano yung mga types ng hedge item? Unahin natin ang recognized asset or liability. So, pag sinabi natin recognized asset or liability, this include financial items and non-financial items such as inventory. So, for example, yung inventory. So, syempre, ang inventory, pwede itong subject sa fluctuation ng prices. Lalo na kung yung item na yon ay prone talaga sa fluctuation ng price. So, syempre, para maiwasan yung magiging unfavorable effect ng change doon sa price, pwede nating i-hedge yung price risk. Nadala-dala, syempre, nitong inventaryo na to. Then, dito tayo sa unrecognized firm commitment. So, this is a firm commitment that is a legally binding agreement for the exchange of a specified quantity of resources at a specified price on a specified future date or dates. So, pag sinabi natin firm commitment, the word commitment, syempre, legally binding. At pag sinabing legally binding, walang urungan. Syempre, kapag committed ka na, dapat kung ano yung pinag-commit mo, dapat gawin mo. Hindi pwedeng pag feeling mo, ayaw mo na, hindi mo na kaya, pagod ka na, ititigil mo na. Susuko ka na at ititigil mo na ang lahat. So, syempre, kapag committed ka, wala kang choice kundi dapat gawin mo kasi obligation mo yun. Pero dito, sa firm commitment, saan ka nag-commit? So, nag-commit ka daw to exchange a specified quantity of resources at a specified price on a specified future date. So, kung ito ay exchange of resources, pwede daw tong either purchase or sales transaction. So, hindi ka pa talaga nagkakaroon ng purchase transaction or sales transaction. Pero nag-commit ka na mag-purchase or mag-sell at a specified price at a future date. So, ibig sabihin, hindi po talaga nangyari kasi mangyayari lang yung actual sales or purchase transaction sa future date na ang settlement price is naka-fix na. So, in-specify na natin siya sa ating commitment. So, dito naman tayo sa third, forecasted transaction. So, kapag forecasted transaction, this is a transaction that is an anticipated transaction that is not yet legally committed. So, dito, hindi ka pa committed. So, ibig sabihin, may choice ka na hindi ituloy. Pag feeling mo na ayaw mo na, so, hindi ka obligated na gawin kasi hindi ka naman legally binded. So, hindi ka committed. So, kasi forecasted lang rin naman siya. Ina-anticipate mo na mangyari itong transaction na to. Pero, kailan allowed na ito ay maging isang hedge item? Kasi hindi porket na forecasted transaction, pwede mo na siyang i-designate as a hedge item. Kailan lang siya magiging hedge item? Kung siya ay highly probable. So, ibig sabihin, para siya ay maging hedge item, kahit na siya ay hindi legally committed, dapat malaki pa rin yung chance na mangyari yung transaction kasi it should be highly probable. So, how do we define highly probable? Sabi niya, this is not defined in the standard AFAR 9, but it is often interpreted to mean a much greater likelihood of happening than more likely than not. So, ibig sabihin, malaki talagang chance mangyari kahit hindi siya committed. So, kahit alam mong hindi mo naman obligasyon, gagawin mo pa rin kasi yun ang tama. So, ipupush mo pa rin yung transaction. Then, last natin na hedge item is net investment in foreign operation. So, this is an amount of the reporting entity's interest in the net assets of that foreign operation. So, ibig sabihin lang nito, tayo na company, meron tayong investment sa isa pang company. Na yung company na yon, yung investee, ay engaged in a foreign operation. So, obviously, kung siya ay engaged in foreign operation, malamang ang risk associated dito sa hedge item is foreign currency risk. So again, ito yung ating mga types ng hedge item na nag-expose sa ating entity to risk na gusto nating i-minimize or i-hedge. So ngayon, punta tayo dito sa hedge accounting. So ano itong hedge accounting? So kung babalikan nyo yung discussion natin kanina, sabi ko, both the hedge item and the hedging instrument, sila ay subject to changes in the fair value or future cash flow. So, si hedge item, nag-change at si hedging instrument, nag-change din. Kasi, kailangan may changes yung dalawa kasi yung changes ng hedging instrument, yun yung gagamitin nating pang-offset doon sa changes na manggagaling sa hedge item. So, kapag nag-offset sila, so masaya tayong lahat. Pero ang gusto kasi nating mangyari, ang offsetting dapat mangyari during the same accounting period. So, yung change na manggagaling sa hedging instrument, dapat kung year 1 yun, dapat yung change sa hedge item, dapat sa year 1 din. Para magkakaroon ng offsetting sa year 1. Yun nga lang, may mga instances na yung change sa hedge item ay na-recognize sa period different from the period na na-recognize yung change from the hedging instrument. Pwedeng yung change sa hedge item nangyari siya ng year 2, Pero yung change sa hedging instrument nangyari naman ng year 1. So, magkakaroon nga ng offsetting pero hindi mangyayari yung offsetting during the same period. Pero at the end, magkakaroon ng offsetting. Pero ang gusto kasi nating mangyari, ang offsetting ay mangyari during the same period. So, paano natin magagawa yon? So, doon papasok ang hedge accounting. So, sabi rito, GAAP's objective is to account for derivative instruments used to hedge risk so that the financial statement reflect their effectiveness in reducing the company's exposure to risk. For the financial statements to reflect the derivative contract's effectiveness, both changes in hedge items fair value and the hedging instruments fair value resulting from the underlying change must be recorded in the same period. The term hedge accounting refers to accounting designed to record changes in the value of the hedge item and in the value of the hedging instrument in the same period. So ngayon, meron naman tayo ditong tinatawag na hedging relationships at meron tayong 3 types. So para saan tong hedging relationship? So ito yung ide-designate nating relationship between the hedge item and the hedging instrument. So kumbaga, kung i-apply natin to sa relationship ng babae at lalaki, pwedeng ito yung tinatawag na label. So, sila ba ay official na o sila ay friends lang or special someone, mga ganon. So, dito naman, for hedging, yung hedge item at hedging instrument, meron din silang relationship. So, pwede daw na ang i-designate nating relationship between the hedge item and the hedging instrument is the fair value hedge, o kaya naman daw pwede ring cash flow hedge o kaya hedge of a net investment in a foreign entity. So, ngayon, dahil meron tayong tatlong hedging relationships, so paano natin malaman kung ano yung hedging relationship na gusto nating i-designate para sa hedge item and the hedging instrument? So, kailangan nating i-define. So, unahin nating i-define ang fair value hedge. So, pag fair value hedge daw, this is a hedge of the exposure to changes in the fair value of a recognized asset or liability or an unrecognized firm commitment or a component of any such item that is attributable to a particular risk and could affect profit or loss. So, dito daw, pwede nating i-designate na fair value hedge ang hedging relationship between the hedge item and the hedging instrument kung ang gusto nating i-hedge is yung exposure ni hedge item sa changes in the fair value. So, pwedeng fair value hedge siya. So, paano naman kapag cash flow hedge? So, ang cash flow hedge daw is a hedge of the exposure to variability in cash flows that is attributable to a particular risk associated with all or a component of a recognized asset or liability or a highly probable forecast transaction and could affect profit or loss. So, pwede naman daw ang hedging relationship na i-designate natin between the hedge item and the hedging instrument as the cash flow hedge kung ang gusto nating i-hedge is yung exposure ni hedge item sa variability in cash flows. So, doon natin pwedeng gamitin yung cash flow hedge. So, kailan naman papasok kapag hedge of a net investment in a foreign entity? So, sabi rito, this is accounted for similarly to a cash flow hedge. So, ibig sabihin, yung accounting procedure for a cash flow hedge also applies to a hedge of a net investment in a foreign entity. So, sabi, a non-derivative instrument daw can be used as a hedging instrument. So, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, pwede tayong gumamit ng non-derivative instrument kung ang risk na gusto nating i-hedge is foreign currency risk. Obviously, since ito ay isang company na engaged in foreign operation, so malamang talaga, ang gamit nitong currency is a foreign currency. So, ibig sabihin, exposed tayo sa foreign currency risk. Kaya, allowed tayong gumamit ng non-derivative instrument as the hedging instrument. Pero usually talaga, ang ginagamit nating hedging instrument is a derivative instrument. Then, the offsetting loss or gain shall be recognized in OCI in the consolidated statements of the parent. Siyempre, itong part na to, this can be understand better if we have an illustrative problem, which is wala para sa video na to. So probably that will be in a separate discussion. So next, punta tayo dito sa ating matrix. So ito yung ating accounting for the hedge item and the hedging instrument. So again, meron tayong apat na hedge item: the recognized asset or liability, firm commitment, and forecasted transaction, and net investment in foreign operation. So sabi natin, both the hedge item and the hedging instrument are subject to changes in value. Kasi yung changes in the hedging instrument, yun yung gagamitin nating pang-offset sa changes in the hedge item. So para saan tong matrix na to? So ito ay para sa accounting for the changes. So paano natin i-account yung changes in the value of the hedge item and the hedging instrument? Saan natin yun i-recognize at paano? So unahin natin ang hedge item. So for the hedge item daw, so yung recognized asset or liability, kapag may changes sa P&L, nire-recognize. At ganun din kapag firm commitment. So P&L din. Pero only under fair value hedge. So ibig sabihin, kapag may changes sa value ng firm commitment, pwede lang to sa P&L kung naka-fair value hedge ang hedging relationship. So kapag cash flow hedge, wala tayong i-recognize na changes in the value. So for the forecasted transaction naman, wala tayong nire-recognize na change in the fair value. But for the net investment in foreign operation, wala tayong nire-recognize na change. Pero ina-apply natin yung standards applicable to the investment. So paano naman kapag sa changes in the hedging instrument? So yung changes sa value ng hedging instrument, so yung accounting natin dito depends on the hedging relationship designated. It's either fair value hedge or cash flow hedge. So dito muna tayo sa fair value hedge. So kapag fair value hedge daw ang ating hedging relationship, ang changes sa value ng hedging instrument is i-recognize sa profit or loss. Kung ang hedge item is a recognized asset or liability or a firm commitment. So, hindi pwedeng gamitin hedging relationship ang fair value hedge kung ang hedge item is a forecasted transaction or a net investment in foreign operation. So, paano naman kung ang hedging relationship is a cash flow hedge? So, kapag cash flow hedge ang ating hedging relationship, ang changes sa value ng hedging instrument, kailangan daw nating hatiin. Hatiin sa effective component at ineffective component. So, yung effective component, so yung changes na considered as effective, yun ay i-recognize sa other comprehensive income. And ang term na ginagamit ng standard for the OCI is the cash flow hedge reserve. So, ito yung term for the OCI account related to the effective part ng change in the value of the hedging instrument. Tapos, yung ineffective part daw, dun siya i-recognize sa profit or loss. So, kung titingnan nyo, meron tayo ditong star. So, etong star na to, sabi, so cash flow hedge is only applicable in hedging the exposure to foreign currency exchange risk. So, ibig sabihin, if the hedge item is a recognized asset or liability o kaya naman daw firm commitment, pwede nating i-designate ang cash flow hedge as the hedging relationship if ang risk na gusto nating i-hedge is a foreign currency risk. And then, meron pa tayo isa rito, yung check mark, exceptions for the following hedge items under fair value hedge. So again, ito ay applicable lang kapag fair value hedge. At ano-ano ito? So, kung ang hedge item natin is a debt instrument, FVOCI, at equity instrument in FVOCI. So, dito muna tayo sa debt instrument. Kapag ang debt instrument is in FVOCI, so, ang changes sa fair value nitong debt instrument na to, kapag siya ay isang hedge item na ang hedging relationship is fair value hedge, i-recognize natin yung changes sa profit or loss. At yung hedging instrument, i-recognize natin sa profit or loss. Pero kapag ang ating equity instrument is in FVOCI at ito ay ating hedge item na ang hedging relationship is fair value hedge, ang changes natin ay i-recognize sa OCI. At kung sa OCI natin i-record yung changes sa hedge item, kung ang hedge item is equity investment in FVOCI, dapat daw ang changes in hedging instrument should also be in other comprehensive income. Siyempre kasi kung dito sa OCI, dapat sa OCI din to kasi kailangan nila mag-offset, 'di ba? So dapat nasa isang lugar lang mangyaring offsetting. Kung sa OCI, sa OCI, kung sa PNL, sa PNL. Kaya ito sa PNL, tsaka ito rin sa PNL. So bakit for equity instrument ay sa OCI? Kasi for equity instrument na in FVOCI, hindi ito nire-recycle papuntang PNL. So hindi siya makakarating ng PNL. Doon lang siya mamamalagi sa equity. Never siyang mapupunta sa PNL. Pero kapag ang debt instrument is recognized in FVOCI, so yung OCI na galing dito sa debt instrument na to, yun ay nire-recycle sa profit or loss. Kaya kapag siya ay hedge item, under fair value hedge, allowed itong changes na to sa profit or loss. So basically, kapag fair value hedge, all changes is recognized in profit or loss except for this one. Kapag ang equity instrument is in FVOCI. So ngayon, punta naman tayo sa hedging instrument. So again, ang sabi natin, ang hedging instrument, para magamit siya na pang-offset, kailangan siya ay subject also to changes in the fair value and cash flows. So a qualifying instrument must be designated in its entirety as a hedging instrument. So, ibig sabihin ng in its entirety, yung buong changes daw dapat from the value of the hedging instrument, pwede siyang i-designate na pang-offset, yung buo, the entirety. Pero may mga exceptions na permitted. At ano-ano yung mga permitted na exceptions? So, pwede daw i-separate ang intrinsic value and time value if the derivative instrument is an option contract and designating as the hedging instrument only the change in the intrinsic value of an option and not the change in its time value. Then yung pangalawang exception, separating, so pwedeng paghiwalayin yung forward element and the spot element. Pero ito ay applicable to a forward contract kung ito ang derivative instrument. And designating as the hedging instrument only the change in the value of the spot element of a forward contract and not the forward element. Similarly, the foreign currency basis spread may be separated and excluded from the designation of a financial instrument as the hedging instrument. Then, last exception natin, a proportion of the entire hedging instrument, such as 50% of the nominal amount, may be designated as the hedging instrument in a hedging relationship. However, a hedging instrument may not be designated for a part of its change in fair value that results from only a portion of time period during which the hedging instrument remains outstanding. So dito sa pangatlong exception, pwedeng proportion lang ng quantity ng hedging instrument ang gamitin nating hedging instrument, hindi lahat. Pero dito tayo mag-focus sa first two bullets. So again, yung first two bullets are about option contracts and forward contracts. So again, sabi natin doon, so pwede daw i-designate natin ang hedging instrument in their entirety or yung exception na pwede nating i-split. So, paano kapag in its entirety? Ibig sabihin, kung option contract siya, ang value ng option contract, pwede nating i-attribute sa intrinsic value at sa time value. At for the forward contract naman, ang value niya pwede nating i-attribute sa spot element at forward element. So, ibig sabihin, may mga changes na pwedeng galing sa intrinsic value o kaya sa time value. At meron ding changes sa value ng forward contract naman na galing sa change in the spot element at meron ding galing sa change in the forward element. So kung ang designation natin is the entirety, ibig sabihin, for option contract, all changes, either the change is from the change in intrinsic value or change in the time value of option, etong dalawang to ay part ng hedging instrument at ito yung gagamitin nating pang-offset sa changes ng hedge item. At kung ang forward contract naman natin ang hedging instrument, so kapag entirety, so ibig sabihin yung buong change ng forward contract, whether it be coming from the change in the spot element or change sa forward element, yung buong changes nila, yun yung gagamitin nating pang-offset sa changes in the value of the hedge item. Pero doon sa exception, pwede daw nating i-split ang intrinsic value from the time value of an option contract or the spot element from the forward element of a forward contract. So, kapag nagkaroon ng split, so kapag option contract ang derivative instrument, ito lang ang pwede natin gamitin na pang-offset sa changes in the value of the hedge item. At ito, for the time value, bawal. Ganun din for forward contract. Only the change attributable to the change in the value of the spot element ang pwede natin gamitin as hedging instrument or pang-offset sa change in the value of the hedge item. Yung change na manggagaling sa forward element, hindi natin siya gagamitin as part of the hedging relationship. So, paano ang accounting natin? So, ganun pa rin naman. So, kapag kasama sa hedging instrument, yung may check, kapag fair value hedge, syempre sabi natin, ang changes sa value ng hedging instrument kapag ang hedging relationship ay fair value hedge, syempre nasa P&L. Tapos kapag ang hedging relationship naman ay cash flow hedge, kapag nagkaroon ng change in fair value ang ating hedging instrument, syempre yung changes ay nire-recognize natin sa other comprehensive income. Na ang term na gamit ng standard is the cash flow reserve. Pero, kung naka-exclude, ano yung naka-exclude? Ito yun, yung time value or the forward element. So, kapag in-exclude natin, so ang treatment natin dito sa time value of the option and forward element of the forward contract is the cost of hedging. So, meron tayong two options kung paano natin to i-recognize. It's either sa profit or loss, so all changes in the time value of the option and the forward element of a forward contract, kung sineparate natin to, pwedeng i-recognize lahat yon sa profit or loss, regardless ng hedging relationship, kung fair value hedge man or cash flow hedge. Sa profit or loss, yung in-exclude nating time value and forward element. And yung second option natin is i-recognize siya sa OCI. So kapag siya ay na-recognize sa OCI, doon na papasok yung accounting for cost of hedging. At pag in-apply natin to, kailangan nating ma-identify if kung yun ba ay transaction related or time period related. So ngayon, we're done with our discussion on concepts about hedging. Pero syempre, hindi lang naman ito ang mga concepts about hedging. So marami pa. Pero sa ngayon, ito lang muna ang ating i-discuss. Dahil sa ngayon, ito pa lang naman yung ating kailangan para ma-apply natin to sa ating accounting for hedging activity. So, for the illustrative problem, those will be in a separate video. So, class dismissed.